Welcome to Infinity Rewatch, the opposite podcast of Outfinity Rewatch. Those guys are horrible. Please don't listen to them. I'm Andrew Fantasia, and I am joined by Mr. Marvel.
And all they talk about on this output, no watch, is freaking DC. That's all they talk about. That's it. Boo.
Ryan loves DC, but I don't.
Yeah. How dare you? How dare you slander this podcast with such blasphemy?
You open the door to Ryan's apartment, and there's just a big poster of Wonder Woman 1984 that you have to walk through like a curtain before you can get into the action. Oh. And then you go into his room, and his bed sheets are Shazam, right?
Don't you be talking about my superhero bed sheets, man? Don't you do that?
Isabella really wanted Wonder Woman bed sheets, but you're like, nope, it's Shazam.
Shazam or nothing.
Shazam or divorce. That's it.
If I were a DC fan, I would have corrected you right then and there, and I'd be like, it's Captain Marvel. It's not even Shazam, baby. Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
But I live on the Marvel side of life. I am a red-blooded Marvel fan, and I'm happy to be here because we're happy to be back. We went on a little hiatus from Moon Knight, but we got Ms. Marvel to carry us through till Thor: Love and Thunder in less than a month. Literally today, less than a month.
That's right, less than a month. We gotta get on top of those tickets soon. But Ms. Marvel came out on the greatest day of the year, June 8th, which is Ghostbusters Day, which automatically makes it the greatest day of the year, among other reasons. But I was so happy from the get-go because, Ryan, I love Moon Knight. You know how much, I was right there along the ride for Moon Knight. I was really digging it. But Ms. Marvel was a return to colorful Marvel, which I feel like we haven't seen in a minute. I feel like I can't remember the last time we saw like the flashy, colorful Marvel. Was probably Shang-Chi, maybe.
I would agree. Shang-Chi was very, very colorful, actually. So I'd agree with that.
So that's one of the things I love most about Marvel is that aesthetic of it. So to come to Miss Marvel, who, by the way, is played by a good Toronto girl.
That's it. I think
she's from Toronto. She's from Ontario.
Come on, baby.
Yes, Iman. Welcome to Marvel. And what I love about her is she is a huge diehard MCU fan too, apparently, from what I hear. So like,
I heard she's a fan in general. Like apparently like they do comic book quizzes with her and everything. And she actually had an epic nerd conversation with Feige. That's how intense she is.
That's beautiful. I hope Feige is like, one day he's like, Iman, you are the new president of Marvel. And she's like, oh, I know.
Yes.
She doesn't even miss a beat. She just rolls up her sleeve. She's like, okay, people, we're moving on to phase 12.
Honestly, I hope that day, as much as I hope that day comes, I hope it never comes because Feige can't do no wrong, man. I would need a day, you know what? I need a whole week off. If I ever heard the news that Feige was stepping down, I would. And I don't even want to put that in the air right now. I just come back.
Come back.
Yeah, but if that ever happens, it will be a sad day. Even if we're on like phase 15 or whatever, it'll be a sad day. I hope he gets into Stan Lee years and he's still coming out with phases at that point. Like the fearless Feige still does it, still doing it.
I feel like if that does happen, which again, don't happen. But if that does happen, I feel like bosses everywhere will understand. It'll become a week of mourning. It's kind of like back in the NES days in Japan when Dragon Warrior came out and like people would just take the day off work to play the new Dragon Warrior. And the bosses were like, yeah, we understand. Dragon Warrior is coming out. Like, I feel like that same thing is happening. You'll be like, boss. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's that like on the unfortunate time when Stan Lee passed on, like there was a moment in my family where my parents were like guys, like we're so sorry, like this is a dark day indeed, It was like it was like I needed a day, man. Like I needed a few days to get over that. Like it was not easy. But if Feige ever stepped down, oh my god. Whew. Let's take it. This conversation never happened. Everyone just bring it back in.
Well, you never know. He might be so disheartened because I heard Feige watched Morbius and he was like, I can never be that good. And there's rumors swirling right now that that's sort of the attitude at the offices, that he's just kind of, you know, they walk past his office. They're like, Kevin, you okay, buddy? And the morale is just down. He's just like, we can't ever reach Morbius. What are we going to do? And that's why I heard Phase 5 is canceled. And Feige is just, he's walking out the door after this phase. He's just saying, sayonara. I'm going to go join a monastery and rethink my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. But in the end, he did it, man. And again, he's still doing it. He's still doing it. And Miss Marvel did not disappoint. Not only was it another return to form in terms of like comic book color, like really eye-popping color. It's a return to form for the teenage superhero, the coming of age story that made Spider-Man so relatable. And this formula works, and it brings so much cultural diversity, and yet still tells that coming of age story that we can all share and experience. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit that this show got a little review bombed from some angry nerds, but like, but at the same time, like this is, you know, if you think like, oh, you know, they're just trying to be Spider-Man, there's nothing wrong with that formula. There is absolutely nothing. And you could tell so many teenage coming of age stories that fit within that narrative, and she's that perfect character. And what she's gonna do for that audience, like for the young women audience, she's gonna deliver that Spider-Man story to them. And they're going to have their Spider-Man story to grow up with. Like, it's huge. Like, this is a very monumental experience. And you have to think about it because Xochitl did a great job in Doctor Strange as Miss America. I think that's her name.
America Chavez.
America Chavez. Sorry,
she didn't win the Miss America pageant. I did. Thank you.
No, I was thinking of the Six Forgotten Warriors. Yeah, no, but America Chavez, like, she had a great story and a very relatable one, but it was within the narrative of Doctor Strange. This time, Miss Marvel's camera's on her. It's her story through and through. Lots of culture, a lot of great culture references of, like, you know, growing up within that kind of family, and it's beautiful. I have a lot of hopes in terms of how Miss Marvel plays within the Marvel world, which we'll talk about. But because I have a lot of questions about this show in terms of just interest in where it's going. But I have to say, like, as a Marvel fan, like, this is like a true coming of age story that we haven't had since Spider-Man, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And if you take another step back, you have to realize, like, there's not many teenage superheroes in this MCU thus far. Like, there's nothing. There's nothing. They're like, I can think of Spider-Man, and I can think of America Chavez, and then I can think of Sprite, but Sprite doesn't count because Sprite's like a 500-year-old god of some kind.
Sprite's collecting pension checks. That doesn't count.
No,
you're right. No, what's important too, like the fact you mentioned of how this is for a group to grow up with, a group of fans to go up with. You're right, because this is a really new character. Miss Marvel, yeah. I think she's only like the last decade she's been created or something like that. Like, she's a really new character. Mm-hmm. So we have to realize that there is a group of young folks, because as far as I know, young folks still buy comic books, I think. I don't know. There are comic apps, there are digital comics, and I know young folks just like things to be digital now. I'm so old. Wow.
But to be fair, I actually am on board with the digital comics, and I'll tell you why before we get into like, oh, Ryan, what are you doing? I love collecting comics. I love having physical comics. I have some physical comics. I would be very hard to like rip from my own hands. I know you have an Infinite Crisis omnibus that I would definitely peruse myself.
It's right there.
It's huge. But that being said, I love the convenience. I do love the convenience of digital because, for example, when I used to travel a lot for work, having a device like, and this is not a plug-in, so just bear with me here, but having a device like my Surface Pro 8, where it's essentially a PC that acts as a tablet. It's been perfect to literally load up a comic and just start going through it. And it's cool too, because you can zoom into the images and really get a appreciation for the art. So that's why like I do like a digital side to it. But on the same side of the coin, there's nothing like picking up pages and turning the pages at the same time.
Yeah, that's a special feeling. It's holding those pages. And I gotta say, again, this is gonna make me sound like I feel like I sound like I'm such a grumpy old man when I talk like this. I'm not. I promise. I am a
Yeah.
childlike, gleeful person. But when I pick up a new modern comic, I don't like the way it looks and feels compared to like a comic from like the early 90s where it had that newsprint paper and that smell, and you get all those cool retro ads for like things that don't exist anymore. You know, like the Cyber Run role-playing game in stores now. Ask your local hobby shop. Like that's what I like. And the look of those comics is just far better than the modern ones. But anyways, I digress, or maybe I don't digress. This is a comic book show after all. But Miss Marvel comics they have been for however long she's been around, the last decade.
I think she came out like literally on the later end of the 2000s to 2010. Like she just came out around that time.
Okay, perfect. So that gives her a nice stretch of time where we have had a group of kids who grew up reading those. You know, there's these kids who grew up who were like, wow, there's a hero who's my age. I want that one. And that became their Spider-Man. I don't think there's a Miss Marvel animated series. So
well, she's been a part of a couple of them. She's been a part of Avengers Assemble, which again, if you watch Earth's Mightiest Heroes versus Avengers Assemble, it does not compare. But there are some charming moments in Avengers Assemble. And yes, Miss Marvel is in it, and she is a fun character. So if we're on the subject of media representation for this character, cartoon wise, she's in two big ones. Marvel Rising, which is like a very youth inspired cartoon that like really has a lot of teenage heroes, and it's very rah and very a very open-minded show that really connects with a lot of different audiences who may associate with LBGTQIA, all those kind of groups, which is fantastic, and I love it. And I love that they're doing shows that really communicate with those audiences, because Marvel has a lot of narratives that help people kind of get through those difficult times, especially through stories like X-Men. Like that's why X-Men is as big as it is, because they've been telling those kind of stories for a very long time. But she's in Marvel Rising, and she's also in Avengers Assemble. One of my favorite stories, and this game's kind of controversial in terms of its reception, but Marvel's Avengers, she's the lead narrative. She's the lead character. And they actually kind of really pull in the core of her character, which is a great segue into the actual show. So we can kind of bring it in here.
Beautiful.
As we do it. Now, the key to her character is she comes in an interesting time in a lot of the kind of the comic book stories where like the Avengers are disassembled, like they don't like each other. They're not getting along. And she comes in with a same perspective as we do as fans, which she comes in as a fan. And it works. It as a writing approach, it really creates a unique symmetry with you, the reader, and her, the character, because what ends up happening is like she's like, "You're Captain America, oh my god!" Like, and she kind of geeks out, but they do it in such a genuine way that you would probably have the same reaction if like, and it sounds kind of corny, but like think about it, like you would have the same reaction as if you were meeting Chris Evans, who played Captain America. Like you would you would see them in a light that they don't normally see in themselves. So that kind of created this unique perspective of her character, and she becomes, you know, as Coulson so aptly describes, the glue of the characters because of her childhood perspective of these heroes. And I think she brings this very admirable hero worship quality that she has. And she does it so perfectly in the show. I mean, I love that the show kind of opens up with this narrative of her look on the Avengers and talks about, I love she talks about Captain Marvel's disappearance and like, yo, she just saved the world. She's gonna take a break. And I'm like, wow, Feige, way to slip that in there. It's just we hear we hear what the fans are saying, but just let you know she needs a break, you know.
Let the woman take a coffee break.
She single-handedly like took on Thanos. Like, she deserves a break herself. So I thought that was, I actually almost spit out my cereal watching that with you, because I thought that was stupid and funny. But yeah, so that genuine hero worship is going to be a big arc for her character throughout this whole thing, because not only is it going to help build up her, which is again beautiful parallels to ourselves reading these heroes, kind of getting this moral center, but at the same time, that's going to play a role in her story, a lot of building herself up as a hero in this thing.
The hero worship, the Avengers hero worship that she has, is something big that I took away from this that I really want to talk about, but I want to get into it later when we talk about her mom, because I feel like there's a connection there. But what a great way to introduce us to this girl, by showing in this little YouTube video she's making that she is an expert on all things Avenger, up to and including her crazy clickbait theory for her next video is right. Thor is, in fact, secretly a gamer. We saw that in Endgame. He spent a lot of time with Korg just playing, I don't know what they were playing, but he was yelling at some 12-year-old. So she's somehow, she's a smart cookie. We know that. She's smart enough to figure out somehow that he is that kind of guy. He likes to play a good game every once in a while. And this setup for her as a character, it's the most, I think, boots on the ground that Marvel has ever gotten with its audiences. It's the most of like, this is you, audience, that we're putting you in a story. So I still have not played that Avengers game. It doesn't really look like it would appeal to me, but I think that was a very smart choice for whoever made that game, to make her the character that you step into. Especially because, from what I gather in the story of that game, the Avengers are already established and very well known. So instead of making you one of these giant mythic figures, they're putting you in the boots of somebody who eventually gets to work with them.
You got it. I will say, though, in the story where she takes over is Avengers. It starts with the Avengers having the A-Day, which is like celebrating the Avengers, and
until it goes wrong.
Until something goes wrong. And after that point, the Avengers have a court case after this big event that like causes damage to the city. They have a court case, and it comes down to Banner's testimony where he says, I don't believe that, the Avengers are here to help. Like, I think they're more dangerous than they're more dangerous, and they shouldn't be there. So it causes the Avengers to separate, go their own way. And then thus Kamala's story starts because of the events of A-Day. And you go through the game recruiting all the Avengers, and she's the one that reminds them why they do what they do. And so that's the narrative of the game.
I wouldn't be surprised if that exact story ends up happening in a movie, because that is a great idea. I probably won't play the game anytime soon, and I don't care about spoilers. So spoil one thing for me. Who is the main villain in this game?
The main villain is MODOK.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
But it alludes to Kree intervention, and there is a scientist that was also a love interest for Banner. It wasn't Betty. It was somebody else. I think her name's Monica. And yeah, she she kind of steals people's powers and puts them into androids and makes these
Ooh.
super androids, kind of like human versions of Sentinels.
So Monica's a big meanie.
Yeah, she's a big meanie.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's her story. So anyway, but yeah, the Kree gets in, like, in the end they tease the Kree, and then there's a whole time they're actually, this is something that is worth noting. The game's expansion talks about time and intervention, and I think it's called Future Imperfect. And Hawkeye goes into like a time coma, and
I hate those. I hate when I go into a time coma.
Time coma. Yeah, and it's because his like life kind of crosses roads in a weird way. Anyway, that could play, like, she could play a part with Kang. Everyone seems like they're teasing the Young Avengers, which I totally get, because they're really only missing one member, and that's it. Like, they have every other member on the roster for the Young Avengers except for one, and that's Hulkling. But that's a tough character to introduce, so it could be possible, could be done, but Young Avengers, it could happen. But yeah, going back to Kamala, yeah, it's oh man, yeah, it's she's got a really interesting story, and I'm very curious how big this story can get.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I think we did such a great. I say we. I didn't work. Andrew did not work on this show. Let me clarify that.
You did.
The
showrunners.
I gave them some feedback on their logo. They said, "What do you think of this logo?" And I said, "Neat." And they said, "Okay." That was my contribution to Miss Marvel. But in this span of 42 minutes or however long this episode was, what a terrific job they did setting up the world and the characters who orbit Kamala. We got to see her, she's having some trouble in school. She has a guidance counselor, Mr. Wilson, who's, I'm sure, going to come back because he was a great character. And he's talking to her about her future. We learn she's in junior year, and she's not really sure what she wants to do. And I wanted to bring a little irrelevant to everybody except me kind of thing up, because I always find this funny. We have a lot of listeners who are from United States and other parts of the world, whatever. We are from Canada. You and I are from Canada. And I wanted to bring this up because it's something I always think about, but this is the first time I've found a place to talk about it here, which is we in Canada, at least my high school, Ryan, we don't say freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. That's a very American thing. We just say grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And I think that's just a fun little thing that people don't know about us weird Canadians tucked away all the way up here. We never, whenever somebody in a movie is like, I'm in my junior year, I always have to sit for like a second and do the math. I'm like, that means that, okay, that's grade 11. It's literally another language at that point. It gets a little lost in translation. So she is, for you Canadian listeners, Kamala is in grade 11. She has one more year to go, but she is already feeling the pressure from guidance counselors and parents to think about her future. We have been there, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. We've been there around the block a few times. I honestly, I love the one thing that I wanted to highlight in this is definitely the comic book feel. They did a really good job of throwing animated graphics throughout the show. Like, there is a ton, and it kind of just sets the tone of this like fun comic book experience, which is, it's kind of meta in a way if you want to look at it. I like the guidance counselor in the high school feel because by the way, the only other terminology I've heard in high school besides 9, 10, 11, 12 is juniors and seniors. That's it. But you're like 9 and 10, you're junior, 11 and 12, you're senior. Like, that's literally the divide. That's the only time I've heard it. And don't get us started on Montreal, because that's a whole different ballgame.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Xi Jep thing and all that. Anyway, so I do like the counselor thing, again, just really capturing the tones of high school life. But I was gonna say to you, I love that we watched together at the same time, and I always have this idea that we're gonna like message each other pretty rapidly, but we're so focused. But one of the things I wanted to point out was the whole counselor thing, like the counselor, in high school, I loved every little detail of her spending time in her life. Though it's an origin story, it doesn't feel boring. Like it's
No.
so good. And I wanted to point that out actually. And I love the guidance counselor talk because again, we've all talked to our guidance counselors, and it's like they never really give you solid advice. Like, you know what I mean? Like I like
It's
for
almost like
me,
getting
like
your tarot card read. They give you advice,
it's
but it's like this advice could apply to 53 other people.
exactly. Like for me, they're like, yeah, you can go into the trade. Yeah, why not? So blessed guidance counselors, they have a tough job. But anyway, but yeah, that's a great moment. And Mr. Wilson's a fun character. And we never know. Like she's gonna have a mentor character. So he could play a mentor role down the road. The key character that we need to keep an eye on is actually her dad. Her dad's a very powerful character that's gonna really kind of shape her heroing story.
I loved her dad. He seemed like such a cool guy. I was genuinely hurt for him when he was like
The Hulk.
saddened. Yeah. And
Yeah.
she's like, get out of here, you're embarrassing me. I was like, oh man, he's crying, the poor man. Um,
No.
but you said something so beautiful just now. You said it's an origin story, but we never feel bored. And I think that can be attributed to, thanks to the comics, thanks to the cartoons, thanks to the beautiful binder of Skybox trading cards that we grew up with, we knew everybody's, like, we knew how Jubilee's origin went. We knew how Daredevil's origin, like, we knew everything. Because Miss Marvel is so new and I have never read anything with her in it or seen anything with her in it, I don't know her origin. Even though they changed her powers from what it is in the comics for the show, I had no idea what her origins are, period.
Mhm.
So watching this, I had like I didn't even realize till you said it just now, but watching this, I was never thinking like, okay, get to the radioactive spider, like knowing what's going to happen, because I am going into a superhero movie/show for the first time ever, I think, without having a clue what the origin is going to be. Like
Yeah.
zero clue.
And I don't want to spoil. Well, I can't really spoil anything because I don't even know myself. So
Mhm.
let's talk about some questions I have about this character. And it's more of just like open-ended questions. Like I don't have an answer for them. We can discuss it a little bit. And viewers, Jonathan out there and a few others, I want you guys to throw in, or I want everyone, I should start using that word more often. I want everyone to throw in their opinion a little bit here. This is going to be an interesting character because she moves through a lot of groups.
Mhm.
First of all, she's a big member of the Avengers. She's a big member. We know that. So potentially could see some Avengers at some point. Although it's interesting because at this point, the Avengers are pretty disassembled, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like they just survived Endgame. Yeah, Iron Man's gone. I'm sure the campus is still there. I don't know who's staying there. And like Widow's a criminal. And
Well, she's dead.
she's also dead.
She's gone now.
Yelena is a criminal. She's a hitman.
Yeah.
Doubt she's going to come around. Kate Bishop is under Hawkeye's training, but she's not an official member. So they're pretty well scattered from what we've seen. So the interesting thing is she also has another history, and it's funny you bring up the change in her powers. And the reason this is a very big deal, not because it's traditionally a comic book move where it's like, well, it's not in the comics. Why would you do that? Like, it's not that simple. The reason of her comic book change and why there's so much discussion about it is because her powers are tied to a very big lineage. Her powers are tied to the Inhumans. So if they changed it, are they going to still relate her to the Inhumans? Because she actually is in also Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, which I love the Ultimate Alliance series. 2 was kind of a rocky ride, but 1 and 3 are solid entries of those games. But she actually goes to the moon and the negative zone to hang out with the Inhumans. And she actually gets familiar with them, and she kind of treats them as like a second family. Like she has to learn their culture, has to learn their, learn the royal family a little bit. So she actually has deep ties to Blackagon Boltigan, or Black Bolt, if you want to go down that route. So the big question is like, because of the change of her powers, is she related to the Inhumans still? Like, is because like the Terrigen crystal gives her her power, and that's what causes her to have the stretch ability. So in this case, is it just a family heirloom? Is that crystal that's embedded in the bracelet? Is that the Terrigen crystal, and that she doesn't need the smoke to unlock her power? I don't know.
Now, how fun must that be for you, man? Because it's like, as somebody who knows the comics so well, to have this opportunity to be like, I legit have no idea where her powers are going to come from. That must be so cool for you to experience it that way.
It is. It's because like I was always working with. It's like well, it's like you said, like let's get to the spider bite. Like, but in this case, for me, this is the first time I'm going in with like no answers. Like I had partial answers for other movies. Like Doctor Strange. I know he goes through a car accident, gets his powers, and like blah 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 blah. In the movie, I just don't know when it's going to happen, and I don't know how it's going to affect him differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like he has to go to Carmitage. Okay, that's not quite the same where the Ancient One is. Okay, we'll roll with it. And then the Ancient One, and then like get into the whole powers thing from there. So it's like, I know, as I always say, Marvel's always good at making the events similar, but how they get to the events are very different. But with Miss Marvel, I don't even know the events, because this character was at the time where I was kind of part-time comic books and as not as much. And it wasn't until I ran into you again in college that I really kind of picked it up again and really got back into it.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'll let you have credit for that one, because you well deserve it for sure. But yeah, like, so she came in on the scene when I was part-time at the time. And to be fair, like, it's not typically a comic book I'd go after, but if I found her in the Avengers, then I'd be like, oh, cool, who's this character, kind of thing, which is what happened. But yeah, so my big question is like, with the big powers change, first of all, her powers look gorgeous. Like, they translate the screen very well, and it's very cool. But my big question is she still related to the Inhumans? Are we going to see a reintroduction of the Inhumans? Maybe as an end credit sequence, it's possible. But with this uncertainty of where Phase 4 is going, it could be a long shot. But at the same time, we did get the reintroduction of Black Bolt, or another reality of Black Bolt, in Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. So if they do tell that story, let me ask you this, as a writer: do you think if they do the Inhumans, is it going to take away from her narrative with her family already?
That's a great question. Her family seems like such an important central piece to all of this, that you would have to be very careful not to upset the balance of that.
Right.
I think what they could potentially do is maybe through some kind of expository flashback, because the mother seemed like, and I want to get more into the mom later, but the mother seemed like she had an idea. Like, she turned around and she sees that bracelet and she's like, don't touch that. That's junk. So if we get the feeling she knows something about that bracelet. And I got a lot of echoes of the Pixar movie Turning Red here, where it's like this thing that's like this magical thing. It's, oh my God, this is crazy. And then the mom is like, well, it's actually hereditarily crazy. This has happened to all of us. So if that is the case, because that does come from her grandma, then the mom might end up having some kind of exposition thing where she says, this is what the story is behind this bracelet. And maybe in the same way that we see Kamala's drawings tell these little cool stories in the margins, we could see a different drawing, as if it's the mother's memory, maybe with like watercolor paint or something, describing the story of this bracelet. And maybe you could put the Inhumans in that. It might not even be a physical appearance, but just more of like an animated depiction in this flashback. And I think that would be a cool way to tie them in without losing focus on the family. But I mean, we know how Marvel fans work, and so does Feige, thankfully. So Feige knows once we see that, once we see, the moon and we hear the word Terrigen, we're going to be like, okay, so when are they coming? And, in my case, more along the lines of when is Crystal coming and can I meet her? Well, I sounded like a creepo.
I just want to see Black Bolt again, man. Black Bolt. Give him that full regalia. Oh, my God, yes.
I want Black Bolt to have to give a speech at a wedding. That's what I want to see. Somebody's getting married. They're like, Black Bolt, we really want you to give a speech, man. Please.
He would literally do this. He'd be like, and then like everyone would be dead. Like just the whole wedding would be done. But yeah, you're right. I think that it might overshadow a little bit. It could be kind of like an end credit teaser, based on the idea of the Inhumans. Of the TV show is kind of like Marvel doesn't even want you to acknowledge that ever happened. Like which is both good and bad, because that means that they want to reset them. They want to reset them for a better suited like story narrative. Now, the interesting thing they could do is like her family could be involved with the Kree, because the Kree are the cause of the Inhumans. The Inhumans are caused by the Kree, because the Kree come to Earth in a long, long time ago, and they test humans, and then through the testing gives them supernatural powers, and then the Inhumans are created, and then the Inhumans, because they're different, they go off into the moon, they become more advanced, and they decide to start like this royal line and this whole thing, because like the most powerful rule all of like I can't remember the name of the Inhuman place right now, but so Adelon, yes, yeah. Thank you, yes. So that whole narrative. So the interesting thing about this is like her mom mentions something about her head in the clouds and doesn't like that Kamala heads are in the cloud, or her head is in the clouds as well. So it could mean that they may find like a piece of a Kree sentry or her family, and maybe they got ousted from finding this like unique thing, and they don't want people just don't want to acknowledge that that's real or whatever. But then they get these powers, and then they get ostracized, and they realize, you know what, we're not superheroes. Like this is not for, like, maybe the concept of superheroes is not even a thing. Like they're just like, this is going to be weird. We don't want any part of this. So whatever. So they leave it, and then Kamala discovers it, and then discovers maybe through discovery of the history of her family, they tell her like, look, we found this alien thing. We don't know what it means. We don't know what it is. And then later on, Captain Marvel comes along. Oh, you have Kree technology, and that's the band, and the band gives her power.
Yeah, that could very well happen. And who knows? They could even go another route and say this was a bracelet made by Phastos, the Eternal. Many thousands of years ago, he just made this bracelet, and a human found it, passed it on to her ancestors, etc.
That's true. That would actually give a lot more reason for the Eternals to actually have like a more connected story of like what the more deeper look into the consequences of what happened, because I think that's the biggest problem with their movie is like aside from a giant statue, which apparently no one's talking about on planet Earth, because the events of Eternals happen post Endgame, and Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel take place post Endgame, and we still haven't heard anything about a giant statue in the middle of nowhere. So I think you're right. That might be a Phastos technology, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, any connection to them, it would be very welcome at this point, because I want to feel the trickle down consequences of their actions. So make that happen. Make that happen. Start putting that in there. Somebody do it. Now we get a sense that she has like a connection with her dad, because he's a more empathetic guy and he understands her. The mom is very strict. She's very old world. She's like, no, this is how it is. This is what I say. Let's do it. Like when we meet the mom, the first thing we hear coming out of her mouth, I think, is just like, go do this. Or like she calls the brother, come down and put this away from me. Like it's very like she's a taskmaster. This lady, she is running this home, and she's the head of the household, and everybody's kind of under her thumb. So the desire to break free, I think that's something every teenager on planet Earth can understand. That's why I love so much that poster for this, where it's just her sitting on the lamppost looking at the skyline of New York. My God, is that ever a beautiful poster? That might be one of the best ones they've ever done.
So teen angst, man. Well, that's a famous comic book cover of Miss Marvel. Like I think that was one of her big comics. So that was a huge nod to her, one of her famous issues.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
But I think you say it so eloquently, which is like it is the teen angst. That's like such a teen angst shot. You know what I mean? Like you just feel it. You feel all the emotions there.
There's teen angst, but there's also teen hope. There's teen hope that like there's the world, and one day I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do something there. Right now I'm stuck here in my beautiful house with a green living room that I really want because I like that kind of thing. Let's talk about her friend Bruno. Is that his name?
His name Bruno? I think so. Yeah.
He had a very Italian name, and I should have written it down, but.
It's Bruno. Yeah, it's Bruno.
Bruno, okay.
Because he had a double alliteration. Fun fact: you notice that in both characters, Kamala Khan and Bruno Belletti or whatever his name is, Balenci, they both have the double alliteration, which is a nice homage to the original comic book characters like Reed Richards, Peter Parker, Sue Storm, yada yada yada.
Now, this guy is a genius. He lives above a convenience store. Which threw me off at first because they go to this like convenience store and he's like, here's the suit I made for you. And I'm like, why is it in the store? What's the hell is happening? And then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. He probably owns the store. And yeah, he lives upstairs. So this kid, he's like a little mini Tony Stark. He's making her these kick-ass gloves. So what's this kid's deal? I'm assuming he's your friend in the comics too, right?
Yeah, I don't know too much other than I think this character is also a character in the comics. His name's Bruno Salelli. He does not have the double iteration.
Oh, he's no longer cool.
Kamala Khan does obviously have it. Yeah. But yeah, so yes, he is a character in the comics as well. I think it's just kind of like the sidekick friend who's like, kind of like the tactician-minded person where it's like, hey, why don't you try this? And then they always have they always seem to have like the guy in the chair as Ned. So that's Miss Marvel's guy in the chair.
Yeah, he's that. What a perfect way to sum it up. That quote is like that will live on.
We all just inherently know what it means, right? Yeah. It's just so perfect.
So let's make like Lin-Manuel Miranda here and stop talking about Bruno, because I want to talk about, I think the second most important character on the show, which is Mama Khan. I don't remember her first name. We'll just call her Mama. Mama is, as we said, she seems to know more than she lets on, but right now she is this sort of central, she is the figure who, if we were back in Sujit's class in college, and he was asking us, what's the story? There's a formula to the story where protagonist wants to do this, but can't because blank. And in that blank, we would put Mama Khan, because she's sort of the one that's always standing in Kamala's way.
A hero has an action against a worthy adversary. To achieve
accomplish. Yes, thank you. That's well remembered, man. That's good.
Yeah, Acting Under the Circumstances, great book if you haven't read it.
Oh, I just looked up and the sky is fully purple. It is beautiful outside right now. So the mother here, I want to bring her into this because I have a lot to say about this particular subject, which is the subject of Kamala is a fan of the Avengers. She's primarily a fan of Captain Marvel, but she seems to love all the Avengers, right? She knows about them. She talks about them, whatever. I think that is such an important piece to this story that needs to be told. And aside from a little bit in Hawkeye with the musical and with Kate Bishop and everything, we haven't really seen this story be told. And that's the idea of like, look, okay, Marvel is all about, we're set in the real world. You know, we're not DC. There's no Gotham. There's no Metropolis. We're set in the real world. This is happening, as Stan Lee put it, right outside your window. Spider-Man could swing by at any time. That's what Marvel's all about. So since that's what Marvel's all about, you need to take moments to turn the camera and point it at the real world so people can be like, holy shit, Thanos, and have reactions to this. Because this world, Ryan, that the MCU takes place in, they have been through some stuff to the point where now I feel like in this world, there should exist, among other things, a cult that worships Thor. That is absolutely a thing. There is a cult out there that worships Thor. There is a group of people who are like maybe some kind of like religious zealots or something who think the Avengers are all devils and they don't care for them. And they're like, we don't want these people here, especially people like Thor, who are, or like Captain Marvel, who are not from Earth. Or, you know, it's people, you know, those weird people who are anti-immigrant, but on a larger scale. Like, this is our planet. You don't come here, take our jobs, right?
They existed in the cartoons. They were called the Friends of Humanity.
Exactly, the Friends of Humanity. They didn't like the mutants one bit until the leader found out he was part mutant, and Sabretooth was like, what you gonna do, bud? Right? So that absolutely would exist in this world. There would be a group of people who are like a large percentage of the population who are just living in constant PTSD from what Thanos did. Like the world would be like, the history of this world would be separated from everything that happened before New York 2012 and everything after, because that changed the landscape of everything. Now people are getting up and they're going to work knowing they live in a world where Loki is a real person and he could come at any moment and try to kill us again. And I don't think we have explored that enough in, I don't want to say realistic, because I don't want these movies to necessarily be realistic, but in a believable way. I feel like I don't believe yet that the people of this world have been through what we've seen them go through, because otherwise, you know, they wouldn't be walking down the street. They'd just be like, oh my God, there's a sorcerer. Sorcerers exist. What am I going to do? Right? So I love that we are starting to tap into that with Kamala, but I bring her mother into it because her mother is, I'm fascinated by it, that she is still this old world mentality of like, never mind these cosmic people, focus on your studies, whatever. I want to know what kind of person she is to live in a world where she looks up and she sees Chitauri descending on the city and she thinks, wow, that's scary, but never mind that, focus on your studies. Like, I am really, I hope that this show explores what the people of Earth, the normal civilians, are seeing and experiencing when Doctor Strange grows 8 arms and punches Dormammu through a wormhole. Like, how are they contextualizing that? And I want to start seeing the Khan family as a proxy for that. Because, again, we got a little bit with Kate Bishop and, you know, those little moments in Hawkeye, like the Thanos was right graffiti. Like, I want that to kind of be a story unto itself. And because I don't know what this story is yet, we don't know if there is a villain in Miss Marvel at all or what's going to happen. I hope that that's what the story is, Ryan. I hope it's about normal humans contextualizing this awesome thing that is happening to their planet, and then, oops, our teenage daughter is now one of those awesome things, right? And I don't know, like, how do you feel about that, about the people of the world needing to be more, the Friends of Humanity and the actual Friends of Humanity who are actually like, hey, we like you. Like, how do you feel about the people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how they should be reacting to super soldiers and red skeleton Nazis, because these things are real for them?
I think that, you know, first of all, I love the question. And I think that the interesting thing about it is it's very much like Inception, right? And with Inception, they talked about how the subconscious, the more you change, the more you do, the more the subconscious starts to attack you, right? Like they get into like riot mode and they just go after like one person. If you haven't watched Inception, you should watch it. A lot of really interesting concepts in that movie. But we still continue to see a rising example of Thanos was right, Friends of Humanity kind of tone. You're right, we saw it in Kate Bishop, but don't forget, we also saw it in Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness when Dr. Nick West said, "Was that the right decision?" Like, I lost my brother, my cats died. Are you sure you're right? So it seems to be this rising flow of like, people that are trying to, overlook the facts, and they're like, look, what are you really doing?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So that's kind of the big question about that. And
Hi.
nice. There you go. Isabella just came in with a cameo.
Isabella had a cameo. She's the Stan Lee of our podcast.
She is the Stan Lee of our podcast. Absolutely. And anyway, so back to for those listening, yes, Isabella just popped her face in to say hi. So I think the mother may play that role. Maybe she does. Like what I'm curious to see actually is because the show kind of ends on an interesting note, because she gets her powers at the Avengers Con, which I don't know why we don't host those in real life. But the Avengers Con is an interesting moment because there's two things that are happening. One, which call out to Ryan, by the way, from actual Marvel. The host of Avengers Con is an employee of Marvel who does a lot of social media for Marvel. So that was really cool to see him in there. I'm sure that was a big win for him to finally be in the show. So the interesting thing about that scene is two things are happening with that audience. One is the audience celebrates that she did something really cool. Then everything starts, the sky literally starts falling around them and everyone's like running and screaming and panicking. But my question is, what is the end result? What is going to be the definitive reaction to Kamala's action, right? Like, because everyone's like, oh wow, you're a superhero, but you're also like completely reckless. Like, are people gonna stop celebrating heroes and start being more terrified of them, and let that narrative start to escalate as more origin stories happen? Like Moon Knight, you can't really do that with Moon Knight because Moon Knight is not like the knight in shining armor character, like, hey, I'm here to save the world. He's in the shadows, I think he's gonna be like the X-Men. And I think even with the X-Men, I think they're gonna be very covert heroes. They're not gonna be right in the spotlight. And I think with characters like Ms. Marvel, and depending on what other heroes they decide to tell the stories of, I don't think we're going to get people celebrating, hey, is that you, Spider-Man? Could you do a flip? Like, I don't think we're going to see that anymore. I think the initial reaction is going to be shock. And then the next reaction is going to be defensive. Like, what are you doing? So but the real question remains, obviously the show is going to have a very positive narrative. It's going to be, because it's kind of a, though it is a comedy, and it's gonna do like, start on a high end, have a low end, and then end on a high end. I think that this particular case, this might be the beginning of the low end. Like, she might worship heroes, but I don't think people do, and that's going to be like that's going to be her big journey.
So you think once she becomes a hero, she's going to see it from the other perspective and realize, like, oh, people are scared of us.
Yeah. And maybe that, that may play as part of the story with her mother. But I don't know, man. The mother is an interesting character because the mother has a lot of mystery to her right now. Mm-hmm. So really, you could Feige radar all over this place. Like, you can just like, she could have some history with the Kree. We don't know. She could also just be a motherly character who's trying to protect culture and identity of Kamala, because one thing about teenagers is the whole point is assembling your identity and becoming yourself. And I think that she's maybe trying to protect her and like doesn't want her to be too exposed to American culture because she wants her to grow up on family values and not have independent thoughts, which is also one of the key scenes in this first episode. Was she's trying on a wedding dress and she hears about a relative that decided like, hey, I'm gonna go travel the world and do my own thing, and how like both her mother and her aunt were like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
too extreme. So the mother may have your standard motherly goals, but of course with Marvel the stakes are always raised, as they say, acting term, if you haven't never heard of this, the stakes are always raised really high, which means like circumstances are always more than what they seem, and they mean more than what they seem to the character. So she could have more protective reasons because of that. Uh, but it's too early to tell, and there's very little to work with. This is a great emotional exploration of a character, of finally seeing another more youthful character on this end. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know. The mother, you're right though. There's something to the mother. I just don't know what it is yet. But I can tell you for sure, based on the comics, I know that the father plays a very significant role of being like an Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of character, just like being a mentorish character to her. But the mother, I'm not too sure about.
Okay. Well, if the turning red vibes that I keep getting from the story so far are accurate, I think we're in for a really emotional arc between
Mhm.
Kamala and her mom. I think it's going to get really, really cool.
Yeah, and also we have the Department of Damage Control narrative at the end credits, which is kind of rare that we got an end credits right in the first episode.
Yeah, very. We got the cop there from Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Mhm.
My buddy Stewie from Succession. I don't know if you watched Succession, you and Isabella. I think you got into some HBO shows, but got into
We
Succession.
we did. Succession was a debated show that we wanted to watch, but then it came down to other choices, and we decided to go with those.
When you're done with those, put on Succession. You are in for a treat. Oh my god.
Will
Uh,
do.
yeah, he's one of the main recurring guys there. And when he showed up, I was like, oh damn, we've got some Spider-Man connections already. So those guys are damage control. I thought they were just cops.
They're part of the Department of Damage Control.
Okay, so they're the ones that clean up after all the mess the
You get
superheroes make, right?
honestly, you could kind of think of them as superhero police because
Okay,
like superheroes have to answer to somebody. And
right.
they're and it's not going to be regular police. And the whole point of damage control was Tony Stark's initiative was the idea. It's kind of like a subsidiary of the Sokovia Accord slash comic books Civil War Mutant Registration Act was the idea that superheroes need to be accountable. So who do they report to? You can't just send them to police. It's not that simple. So they created a faction of the government called Department of Damage Control, which obviously cleans up after superhero events. But like actual police, they have to take in a superhero and like question them and then also potentially accuse them of like essentially collateral damage.
Ah, okay. So that's going to get interesting because they're going to be up Kamala's butt with all their regulations, and she's going to be like, "Leave me be. I'm just trying to do my own thing."
Just a kid.
I know. And I love. It was such a beautiful moment of just seeing her make this really elaborate plan, and then nothing about it goes right. She can't leave the table on time. Like it's everything goes wrong from the get go. It's a great way to show how far she's going to come. And I already can't wait to see her reaction when she finally meets Carol Danvers. Like,
Absolutely.
like what she's gonna lose her mind. It's gonna be so much fun to see that happen.
Oh man, I'm excited because she could revive Captain Marvel in a really fun way. Um, there's a lot. I mean, with Captain Marvel, I have a lot of big bets that I hope pay off, and I don't know if they will. One of which is that she'll introduce Rogue. I'm
Yes,
so
please.
I'm still heavily invested in the idea that she will resurrect, or she will introduce Rogue into the MCU. And you know, we talked about a concept of a video, Fantasia and I, and if they do that, they can't put Rogue in the trailer. Like, if you're gonna introduce someone of Rogue's caliber, you do not hint, talk about, or tease any idea that this character is coming, and you just drop them in like you sort of did with the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
You don't, you say it's Illuminati, but you don't know who you're really getting, and it was quite a surprise. But imagine had you not said that, had you not said the Illuminati was in that movie, whoo, man, the feeling in that theater, oh my god.
We would have lost our minds. So, Feige, if you're listening, as Rogue would put it, y'all better listen, sugar. Okay? Y'all better do what Ryan says.
But I mean, like, here's the thing. Like, Kamala, she faces Taskmaster. Kamala, she faces Taskmaster. She runs into Spider-Man a lot. She hangs out with Miles Morales all the time. She, oh man, she's around so many characters.
Oh yeah, Miles is.
Inhumans.
I think Miles is also from Brooklyn, right? She's from Brooklyn too. They're both
Yeah,
from Brooklyn?
Technically, yeah, but like, remember, Miles is from an alternate reality, so like, again,
well,
I
mean, we haven't
met
him yet, but I mean, like, just from the comics, Miles is. I think that he's also from Brooklyn.
He could be, yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, so they, once they throw him in the MCU, there you go. They're neighbors. They can hang out all the time.
But yeah, like, there could be a lot of big cameos in this, and especially too, now that she's already with Department of Damage Control, we may get She-Hulk early. Jennifer Walters may appear in this series, and it kind of makes sense. Like, here's the other thing that I think you could kind of use as like an expectation meter, is like, the narrative is like almost too similar to Spider-Man. Like, the flow and the feel of the show is almost identical to Spider-Man. It's almost as if Spider-Man was a test pilot to see like how they can play a teenage story and then like adjust it for like other characters that fit the same narrative. And so, that being said, are they going to have a Matt Murdock moment where we're going to see either Matt Murdock, or we're going to see Jennifer Walters be introduced in this show? But that being said, keep in mind, Marvel plays it smart. If it's Miss Marvel's show or Kamala's show, then Jennifer Walters probably won't be introduced because she has her own show coming. So save it for then. That being said, we could see Matt Murdock again. Right? He has experience now with Damage Control. So he could be the pro bono case for her. And first of all, another example of this, by the way, is another kind of piece of evidence I have is that her parents, with the car accident and the driver instructor, her parents just kind of dodged the whole, probably, paying for his car damages, because they didn't accept any blame. They turned all the blame on everything else but her. So that would tell me, that like, this could escalate to a point where she's going to need a pro bono lawyer. And Matt Murdock will be that perfect kind of cameo. So we could get him again. Kind of would be cool, because so far we've seen a lot of Daredevil characters now in MCU, especially if you build it off of Hawkeye, because you have two Daredevil characters in Hawkeye with Echo and Kingpin. So why not throw Matt Murdock back in the ring with Miss Marvel and then continue that narrative?
Yeah, especially if she keeps wrecking, convention halls with her powers. She's definitely going to need a lawyer.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, for the first episode, I think this is a really strong pilot. I think we get a bunch of information in a pretty tight 40-ish minutes. I'm really liking how good of a start Miss Marvel was, and I'm glad all those crazy, stupid review bombers were proved wrong already.
They were.
They usually are. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts on Miss Marvel, since you are Mr. Marvel?
Thank you. I would say, like I said, I think this is a great exploration of a teenage coming of age story. Yes, like don't like again, this show could be one of the biggest surprises in terms of Marvel content yet. We don't know. So far, Doctor Strange kind of really you thought Spider-Man No Way Home played it up with Daredevil. Well, like Doctor Strange just like amped that up by like 20 more notches, and then like we got everything else. So Miss Marvel could be another big like drop of characters. We don't know. It's kind of too early to tell. Um, my biggest question, though, my biggest interest in the show is she going to tie to the Inhumans? And if so, that could open a lot of doors. So that's my big interest in it in terms of Marvel world stuff. Other than that, this is just going to be a fun ride with a great story and just like great comic book feels. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I love it too, and I love the visuals. If they keep these strong, beautiful comic-y visuals up, this story could literally just be about her picking her electives for grade 12, and I would be entertained by it. So I'm on board. They have sold me with episode 1, which is kind of their job. So good job, Marvel Studios. You've done it again. Ryan, where can the good people find you when you're not planning Avengers Con 1? Because you have to start planning that.
You can find me online at Twitter, as you guys seem. Anytime I start posting anything, you guys seem to come right out of the woodwork, and it's really nice to see that. So thank you so much for that. So you can find me on Twitter at Crusader Online, and then if you just want to see some personal stuff, I post every once in a blue moon. You can join me over on Instagram at Ryan J. Whitehead. So you can join me there. And then if you want to catch me live, you can catch me live Tuesdays and Thursdays on Xbox Canada over on Twitch.
And we really need to stress again, guys, the personal stuff he puts on Instagram is not nudes. Please stop asking for nudes. All right, Ryan, if you want to give them, you are free to, but guys, please don't harass Ryan for nudes. He will post them when he's good and ready.
You don't want them. You don't want them.
And you can find me on Instagram and the Twit at Andrew Fantasia. And then you can find me here and on our sister show, the Rebel Scum Podcast show on the Rebel Scum Podcast Network, talking about the Star Wars, because there's Obi-Wan is also out right now. So that is, he's my second favorite Star Wars character. So that's kind of a big deal for me. I am all over that. But yeah, that is where we are. That is where you are. And I hope everybody listening everywhere has a Miss Marvelous day.